The alarm bells echoed through the massive space station that hung in orbit around Kepler 442b, their shrill sound cutting through the usual hum of diplomatic activity like a knife through silk. Lisa Kane sat in her assigned chair at the human delegation table, watching as hundreds of alien representatives rushed into the Grand Council chamber, with expressions of panic and fear written across their various faces and appendages. She took a slow sip from her coffee mug, the warm liquid helping her maintain her calm demeanor as chaos erupted around her. The Zephyrian delegate burst through the main entrance, his crystalline form crackling with electrical energy that betrayed his emotional state. Behind him came the Altarian Federation's representatives, their flowing robes billowing as they moved with urgent purpose toward their seats. Within minutes, the chamber filled with the sounds of dozens of different languages, all expressing the same sentiment of shock and disbelief. Ambassador Vextar of the Morphic Collective slammed his three-fingered hand against his speaking podium, the impact resonating through the chamber's acoustic systems. His voice boomed across the vast space as he announced what everyone already knew, but no one wanted to believe. The Zephyrian Empire had declared war on the Altarian Federation, ending 3,000 years of unprecedented galactic peace with a single transmission that had been received just hours earlier. Lisa continued drinking her coffee while representatives from every corner of the galaxy shouted questions and demands. The insectoid hive queens chittered anxiously among themselves, their compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting that had automatically activated when the war declaration was received. The gaseous beings from the Nebula Consortium swirled in agitated patterns within their containment suits, while the silicon-based crystalline hegemony representatives resonated with harmonic frequencies that expressed their deep concern. The human ambassador remained seated as other delegates jumped to their feet, waving appendages and demanding immediate action. She watched with interest as ancient alliances were quickly renewed and new ones hastily formed. Species that had barely spoken to each other in centuries suddenly found themselves planning military cooperation with the desperate efficiency of those who knew their peaceful way of life was ending. Commander Zixara of the Altarian Federation's defense forces stood at the central podium, her elegant features drawn tight with worry as she outlined the threat her people faced. The Zephyrian Empire had amassed a fleet of unprecedented size, she explained, with weapons that had not been seen since the last Great War 3 millennia ago. The Altarians had already begun evacuating their border worlds, but they needed allies if they hoped to survive the coming storm. War Commander Karthak of the Zephyrian Military Council took his turn at the podium, his reptilian features set in grim determination as he explained his empire's position. The Altarians had violated ancient territorial agreements, he claimed, and had been secretly building military installations in disputed space. The Zephyrians had tried diplomatic solutions for decades, but patience was no longer possible when their very existence was threatened. Lisa listened to both sides present their cases, noting how each claimed righteousness while accusing the other of aggression. She had read the classified human intelligence reports that morning, and knew the truth was far more complex than either side was admitting. Both empires had indeed been preparing for conflict, each convinced that the other was planning an attack. Fear and suspicion had finally overcome 3,000 years of peaceful cooperation. The debate continued for hours as species after species pledged their support to one side or the other. The ancient void swimmers emerged from their long isolation to announce their alliance with the Altarians, while the crystalline hegemony declared their loyalty to the Zephyrian cause. Trade partnerships became military alliances, and old grudges suddenly became reasons for choosing sides in a war that was growing larger by the hour. Through it all, Lisa Kane sat quietly in her chair, occasionally checking her tablet or refilling her coffee from a thermos she had brought from Earth. Her calm demeanor began to attract attention as the session wore on and emotions continued to escalate around her. Several delegates glanced in her direction with expressions of confusion and concern, wondering why the human representative seemed so unconcerned about a war that threatened to engulf the entire galaxy. Commander Vextar finally addressed her directly, his voice carrying a note of frustration that resonated through his translator device. He demanded to know why humanity remained silent while the galaxy prepared for its first war in 3 millennia. Did the humans not understand the magnitude of what was happening? He asked. Were they too primitive to grasp the implications of galactic warfare? Or were they simply too cowardly to take a stand? Lisa stood slowly, setting down her coffee mug with deliberate care before walking to the speaker's podium. The chamber fell silent as she activated the translation system, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast space. She thanked the assembled delegates for their passionate speeches and acknowledged the gravity of the situation they all faced. War was indeed returning to the galaxy after 3,000 years of peace, and every species would have to decide how to respond to this new reality. However, she continued with a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Humanity would not be choosing sides in this conflict. The human government had reviewed the situation carefully and decided that the best course of action was to observe and offer humanitarian assistance where needed. They had no interest in participating in military actions against either the Zephyrian Empire or the Altarian Federation. The response was immediate and explosive. Delegates shouted questions and accusations, demanding to know how humanity could remain neutral when the very foundations of galactic civilization were under threat. Some accused the humans of cowardice, while others suggested they were waiting to see which side would win before offering their support. The noise level in the chamber rose to nearly unbearable levels as centuries of diplomatic protocol collapsed under the weight of impending war. Lisa waited for the outcry to die down before speaking again. She explained that humanity had spent the past 3,000 years of peace learning and preparing, though she did not elaborate on what they had been preparing for. The human species preferred to think carefully before acting, she said, and they were not yet ready to commit to any particular course of action. For now, they would watch and wait. As the session finally ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber to contact their home governments, Lisa remained at the podium for a few extra moments. She pulled out a secure communication device and placed a call that would reach Earth within hours. When Director Murphy answered, her message was brief and to the point. It was time, she told him, to dust off the old files and begin implementing the contingency plans they had hoped would never be needed. The galaxy was about to remember what humans had been doing during 3,000 years of peace. Director Ryan Murphy stood in what appeared to be a simple agricultural research facility on Earth, surrounded by fields of genetically modified corn that swayed gently in the artificial breeze generated by atmospheric processors. The building looked like any other farming operation from the outside, complete with weather-beaten signs advertising crop yields and soil enhancement programs. However, 300 feet beneath the cornfields lay one of humanity's most classified military installations, a facility that had been expanding continuously for the past 3,000 years. The underground complex stretched for miles in every direction, housing technologies and weapons systems that no other species in the galaxy suspected existed. Murphy walked through corridors lined with sealed blast doors, each one protecting research projects that could reshape the balance of power in galactic warfare. Scientists and engineers worked quietly at their stations, running final checks on systems that had been theoretical just days before, but were now being rapidly prepared for possible deployment. Dr. Nicole Foster reviewed archived research data on Mars, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed 3 millennia of accumulated intelligence on every known species in the galaxy. The facility officially studied historical warfare patterns and served as a library for academic research, but the basement levels contained detailed analyses of alien military capabilities, weapon systems, and tactical doctrines that had been gathered through careful observation and subtle intelligence operations. She pulled up files on Zephyrian crystal-based energy weapons and noted their inherent weaknesses, information that had been collected by human traders and diplomats over centuries of seemingly innocent interactions. The Zephyrian military had not changed their basic weapon designs in over 2,000 years, she observed with professional interest. Their energy crystals were powerful, but required specific harmonic frequencies to function properly, frequencies that could be disrupted by targeted electromagnetic interference. The Altarian Federation's military records showed similar patterns of stagnation during the long peace. Their ships still used the same defensive configurations that had served them well in the last Great War, with shield generators positioned in predictable locations and power systems that followed standardized layouts. Foster made notes about optimal targeting solutions while sipping tea from a mug decorated with the logo of the Mars Historical Society. Captain Alex Rivera commanded what alien observers believed was a simple cargo vessel called the UES Wanderer, currently docked at a civilian spaceport in the Proxima Centauri system. Her ship's manifest listed agricultural supplies and manufactured goods bound for the outer colonies, and her crew appeared to be typical civilian spacers going about their routine business. However, sealed compartments throughout the ship contained military hardware that had never appeared on any galactic arms registry. Rivera supervised what she called equipment checks, watching as her crew performed maintenance on systems that did not match the ship's official specifications. Chief Engineer Tony Brooks worked on power coupling that could channel energy loads far beyond anything a cargo vessel should require, while Navigator Karen Hill calibrated sensors that could detect ships at ranges that would impress military commanders. From any species in the galaxy, the crew moved with practiced efficiency as they prepared their vessel for operations that went far beyond simple cargo transport. Weapon systems disguised as industrial equipment were tested and calibrated, while communication arrays capable of military-grade encryption were checked for optimal performance. To any outside observer, the UES Wanderer was just another human merchant ship preparing for a routine voyage. Lieutenant Jake Chen sat at what appeared to be a simple monitoring post in the asteroid belt, officially tasked with tracking space debris and providing navigation warnings to passing ships. His small station consisted of a single habitat module attached to a processed asteroid, with solar collectors and communication equipment that looked standard for such installations. However, the sensors hidden within the asteroid itself were far more sophisticated than anything civilian traffic control required. Chen watched as both Zephyrian and Altarian fleets moved through space toward their planned battle zones, their ships following predictable routes and using communication protocols that human intelligence had been studying for centuries. The aliens made no attempt to hide their movements or encrypt their tactical discussions, operating under the assumption that no one else in the galaxy possessed the technology to monitor their activities from such distances. His screens displayed detailed information about ship classes, weapon loadouts, and crew complements that would have surprised military commanders on both sides. Human monitoring stations throughout the galaxy were quietly gathering intelligence on fleet movements, supply lines, and strategic planning sessions that the aliens considered completely secure. The level of surveillance capabilities that humanity had developed during the long peace would have shocked species that still viewed humans as newcomers to galactic civilization. War Commander Karthak addressed his fleet commanders from the bridge of his flagship, outlining battle plans that followed traditional Zephyrian military doctrine with minor modifications for current circumstances. His tactical approach relied on overwhelming firepower delivered by massive capital ships arranged in formations that had proven successful in conflicts dating back thousands of years. The Zephyrian military had maintained their proud traditions throughout the peaceful era, preserving ancient knowledge that they believed gave them significant advantages over enemies who might have grown soft during the long period without warfare. Admiral Zixara held similar planning sessions with her Altarian officers, reviewing strategies that emphasized mobility and coordinated attacks by smaller vessels working in carefully choreographed patterns. The Altarian approach focused on precision strikes against key targets, using their superior ship handling to avoid direct confrontation with heavier enemy units whenever possible. Both sides prepared for battle using tactics that had been refined over millennia of theoretical study but had not been tested in actual combat for 3,000 years. Neither commander realized that their planning sessions were being monitored by human intelligence operatives who had spent centuries learning to intercept and decode military communications from every major species in the galaxy. The humans knew exactly what strategies both sides intended to use, what weapons they would deploy, and even which ship formations they preferred for different types of engagements. And Admiral Ben Tyler watched the alien preparations from the bridge of what appeared to be a scientific research vessel, positioned at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. His ship, the UES Discovery, was officially conducting astronomical observations and had received permission from both warring factions to remain in the area as long as they maintained strict neutrality. The aliens viewed the human presence as harmless and even somewhat beneficial, since neutral observers could provide testimony about the honorable conduct of their forces during the coming battle. Tyler's crew included specialists who were anything but civilian scientists, though their cover identities would pass any inspection. Commander Patricia Wells served as his tactical officer while officially holding the position of senior astronomer. Her expertise in enemy ship analysis, hidden behind credentials in stellar formation studies. Engineer Carlos Santos worked on what aliens thought was a deep space communication array, but was actually a sophisticated weapon system designed to engage targets at unprecedented ranges. The first skirmishes between Zephyrian and Altarian forces had already begun in several outer systems. Small-scale engagements that served as tests of strength and opportunities for both sides to evaluate their opponent's capabilities. Human observers positioned throughout the combat zones recorded every detail of these preliminary battles, noting weapon effectiveness, defensive measures, and tactical decisions that revealed important information about how the aliens would fight when the real war began. Dr. Rachel Stone led what appeared to be a humanitarian mission to provide medical assistance to refugees displaced by the early fighting. Her ships carried genuine medical supplies, and her staff included qualified doctors and nurses. But every member of her team had received additional training in intelligence gathering and technical analysis. They moved freely through areas controlled by both sides, offering aid to civilian populations while quietly documenting military installations and gathering information that would prove invaluable if the conflict escalated. The aliens gratefully accepted human assistance, viewing it as evidence of humanitarian compassion from a species that lacked the military capability to participate directly in the war. They allowed human medical teams access to areas that would normally be restricted to military personnel, never suspecting that the doctors and nurses treating their wounded were also mapping their defensive positions and analyzing their technology. As reports flowed back to Earth through encrypted channels, Director Murphy reviewed the intelligence summaries with growing confidence. The first major battle of the new Galactic War was about to begin in the Proxima Centauri system, where both the Zephyrian Empire and Altarian Federation had committed their most powerful fleets to what each side hoped would be a decisive engagement. Massive capital ships moved into position with the stately grace of ancient leviathans, their hulls gleaming in the light of the binary stars, while weapon systems charged and defensive shields hummed with barely contained energy. War Commander Karthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Pride of Zephyr, watching as his fleet arranged itself in the traditional battle formation that had served his people well for thousands of years. His heavy cruisers formed the center line, while lighter vessels took positions on the flanks, creating a wall of firepower that could devastate any enemy foolish enough to approach directly. The Zephyrian commander felt confidence flowing through his crystalline body as he contemplated the coming victory over the Altarian forces. Admiral Zixara commanded the Altarian fleet from her vessel, the Star of Freedom, positioning her ships in a more flexible formation that would allow for rapid movement and coordinated attacks. Her strategy relied on speed and precision rather than brute force, using her ship's superior maneuverability to strike at enemy weaknesses while avoiding direct confrontation with the heaviest Zephyrian units. Both commanders prepared for battle using tactics that had been tested in countless simulations, but not in real combat for 3 millennia. Admiral Ben Tyler observed the alien preparations from the bridge of the UES Discovery, officially present as a neutral scientific observer, but actually commanding one of humanity's most sophisticated intelligence-gathering operations. His ship maintained position at the system's edge, far enough from the battle zone to appear safe while close enough for his advanced sensors to record every detail of the coming engagement. The human vessel looked unremarkable compared to the mighty warships preparing for battle, its hull bearing the peaceful symbols of scientific research rather than military insignia. However, concealed within its seemingly civilian structure were observation systems that could analyze alien weapons and defensive measures with precision that would surprise military experts from any species in the galaxy. Commander Patricia Wells monitored multiple displays that showed detailed readouts of enemy ship configurations, weapon charges, and power distributions. The battle began exactly as human analysts had predicted, with both sides announcing their intentions through formal challenges broadcast on open frequencies. The Zephyrian fleet advanced in perfect formation while the Altarian ships spread out to encircle their enemies, each side following tactical doctrines that had remained unchanged since the last Great War. Honor and tradition guided their movements as much as strategic necessity. creating patterns that were as predictable as they were magnificent. Karthak fired the first shot, a massive energy beam that lanced across space from his flagship's primary weapon array. The blast struck the shields of an Altarian cruiser with spectacular results, sending cascades of energy rippling across the defending vessel's protective barriers. Zixara responded by ordering a coordinated attack on the Zephyrian left flank, her ships moving in perfect synchronization as they unleashed precisely targeted fire at enemy weak points. The human observers watched with professional interest as the alien fleets engaged in combat that was both beautiful and tragically ineffective. Both sides fought with courage and honor, announcing their attacks and following rules of engagement that had been established during more civilized times. They avoided targeting life support systems, allowed disabled vessels to withdraw from combat, and generally conducted themselves according to ancient codes of military honor. Engineer Carlos Santos worked at his station on the UES Discovery, officially monitoring stellar radiation but actually analyzing the effectiveness of alien weapons and defensive systems. His instruments recorded data that revealed fundamental weaknesses in both Zephyrian and Altarian military technology, information that could prove decisive if humans ever needed to engage either fleet in combat. The aliens were fighting with weapons that prioritized spectacular visual effects over actual destructive capability, using energy frequencies that were easily absorbed by properly configured defensive shields. The battle continued for hours with neither side gaining significant advantage despite the massive expenditure of energy and the destruction of numerous vessels. The Zephyrian formation held firm against Altarian attacks while inflicting steady damage on the more mobile enemy ships, but their heavy weapons were too slow to effectively target the faster Altarian vessels. Meanwhile, the Altarian precision strikes were gradually wearing down Zephyrian defenses, but their lighter weapons lacked the power to quickly disable the enemy's massive capital ships. Dr. Rachel Stone arrived in the system aboard her medical vessel just as the intensity of the battle began to decrease, both fleets having exhausted much of their ammunition and suffered casualties that made continued fighting inadvisable. Her ship, the UES Mercy, immediately broadcast humanitarian intentions and received permission from both sides to approach the battlefield and provide assistance to damaged vessels. The aliens viewed human medical aid as a welcome neutral service, never suspecting that the rescue operation served multiple purposes. Stone's medical teams worked efficiently to treat wounded personnel from both sides, their genuine compassion for injured beings earning gratitude from Zephyrian and Altarian commanders alike. However, every doctor and nurse on her team had received additional training that allowed them to gather intelligence while providing medical care. They noted the layout of alien ships, the location of critical systems, and the capabilities of damage control equipment, while saving lives and treating injuries. The battle ended in mutual exhaustion rather than decisive victory, with both fleets withdrawing to repair damage and treat casualties. The Zephyrians had lost several cruisers and dozens of smaller vessels, while the Altarians suffered similar losses despite their superior mobility. Neither side had achieved their strategic objectives, and both commanders realized that the war would be longer and more costly than originally anticipated. Lieutenant Jake Chen monitored the aftermath from his asteroid observation post, tracking the movements of damaged ships as they limped away from the battlefield toward repair facilities in their respective territories. His sensors recorded detailed information about alien damage control procedures, repair capabilities, and the locations of supply depots that would be crucial for sustaining prolonged military operations. The Human Intelligence Network was building a comprehensive picture of alien military logistics that would prove invaluable in any future conflict. War Commander Karthak and Admiral Zixara both filed reports with their superiors that expressed surprise at the resilience of their enemies and the difficulty of achieving decisive results in modern space combat. Both commanders requested additional resources and began planning new strategies that might prove more effective against opponents who had also spent the peaceful centuries maintaining their military capabilities. Neither realized that their after-action reports were being intercepted and analyzed by human intelligence services. The human observers had witnessed exactly what their analysts had predicted based on 3,000 years of studying alien military doctrine. The warring species were fighting according to ancient patterns that emphasized honor and tradition over effectiveness, using weapons and tactics that had remained essentially unchanged during the long peace. Their military thinking had stagnated during the peaceful era, creating opportunities that a more adaptive species might exploit. Tyler's crew prepared detailed reports on alien combat effectiveness that would be transmitted to Earth through encrypted channels. The data confirmed that galactic military forces had indeed grown predictable during 3 millennia without serious conflict, relying on outdated concepts of honorable warfare that left them vulnerable to more innovative approaches. The aliens fought like they were participating in a carefully choreographed ritual, rather than struggling for survival in desperate combat. Commander Patricia Wells compiled tactical analyses that revealed fundamental weaknesses in both Zephyrian and Altarian military doctrines. Their weapons were designed more for impressive displays than maximum destructive effect. Their formations prioritized traditional appearances over tactical flexibility, and their communication procedures followed protocols that made interception and jamming relatively simple for anyone with sufficiently advanced technology. As the various human intelligence assets began transmitting their observations back to Earth, Director Murphy reviewed the preliminary reports with satisfaction. The first major battle of the new Galactic War had proceeded exactly as human military strategists had anticipated, confirming that alien forces were indeed vulnerable to the innovative approaches that humanity had been developing during the long peace. The galaxy was about to learn that 3,000 years of preparation could produce very different results depending on how that time was used. The war was expanding to new systems as additional species chose sides and committed their forces to the growing conflict. But the fundamental patterns remained the same. The Galactic War had spread across dozens of star systems like a plague, consuming resources and lives as more species abandoned their peaceful ways and chose sides in the growing conflict. The crystalline hegemony formerly allied with the Zephyrian Empire, while the ancient void swimmers emerged from their deep space isolation to support the Altarian Federation. Trade routes that had operated safely for centuries became battlefields as civilian vessels were pressed into military service, and peaceful colonies found themselves on the front lines of an increasingly desperate struggle. Colonel Nathan Gray commanded what appeared to be a humanitarian relief operation centered around the human vessel UES Compassion, officially dedicated to providing medical supplies and refugee assistance to populations displaced by the expanding war. His ships moved freely through combat zones under flags of neutrality, carrying supplies that both sides desperately needed and offering services that no military commander could refuse. The aliens welcomed human aid with gratitude, viewing it as evidence that at least one species retained its civilized values despite the chaos consuming the galaxy. However, every member of Gray's relief mission served dual purposes that went far beyond humanitarian assistance. Dr. Kim Walsh treated wounded refugees while simultaneously gathering intelligence on alien medical, technology, and biological vulnerabilities. Technician Steve Parker distributed communication equipment to refugee camps while installing concealed monitoring devices that would track alien military movements for months to come. The relief supplies themselves contained embedded sensors and transmitters that created an intelligence network spanning dozens of worlds. The human aid workers moved with professional efficiency through refugee centers and military hospitals, their genuine compassion for suffering. Beings earning trust from aliens who never suspected their true capabilities. They documented defensive positions while treating civilians, mapped supply routes while distributing food, and analyzed weapon systems while repairing damaged equipment. Every act of kindness served multiple purposes, creating an intelligence database that revealed alien military capabilities in unprecedented detail. The war itself had begun to follow patterns that human analysts found both predictable and troubling. Battles grew larger and more destructive as both sides committed additional resources to what had become a galactic-scale conflict. But the fundamental ineffectiveness of alien military doctrine remained unchanged. Ships were destroyed and crews were killed. But neither side achieved strategic objectives that justified the enormous costs they were paying. War Commander Karthak had expanded his fleet to include vessels from a dozen allied species, creating a massive armada that should have been capable of crushing any opposition through sheer weight of numbers. However, his forces continued to operate according to traditional tactical doctrines that emphasized formation fighting and direct confrontation, approaches that proved increasingly inadequate against enemies who employed similar methods. Battles became grinding contests of attrition, rather than decisive engagements that could end the war. Admiral Zixara commanded an equally impressive coalition fleet that included some of the most advanced vessels in galactic space, but her forces suffered from the same fundamental limitations that plagued their enemies. The Altarian emphasis on mobility and precision strikes remained effective against traditional opponents, but proved insufficient to achieve decisive victory against enemies who had spent 3,000 years perfecting their defensive capabilities. The war was becoming a stalemate that consumed resources without producing meaningful results. Both sides began considering options that had been forbidden since the end of the last galactic war, weapons and tactics that civilized species had agreed never to use again. Ancient arsenals were opened and terrible devices were prepared for possible deployment. Technologies capable of sterilizing entire worlds or destroying whole star systems. The galaxy stood on the brink of devastation that would make the current conflict seem trivial by comparison. Captain Jennifer Torres received new orders aboard the human vessel UES Meridian while officially conducting routine cargo operations in the Vega system. Her ship appeared to be just another civilian freighter moving supplies between neutral worlds, but her crew included specialists whose training went far beyond commercial spaceflight. Chief Engineer Bob Martinez maintained systems that no cargo vessel should possess, while Navigator Linda Foster plotted courses using navigation data that revealed the locations of hidden military installations throughout the galaxy. The orders that Torres received were brief but significant, indicating that humanity's observation phase was finally coming to an end. Admiral Helen Price would soon arrive with additional human vessels that appeared to be routine patrol ships, but carried capabilities that would surprise military experts from any species in the galaxy. The time had come for humanity to reveal what they had been preparing for during 3,000 years of apparent peace. Price's fleet consisted of vessels that looked unremarkable compared to the mighty warships that alien species deployed for major battles. The human ships were smaller and less impressive than traditional capital vessels, with hulls that bore civilian markings and equipment that appeared to be standard for police or customs enforcement, rather than military operations. However, appearances could be deceiving when dealing with a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of looking harmless while preparing for war. Commander Daniel Cruz served as Price's tactical officer aboard the flagship UES Resolution, officially rated as a system patrol vessel, but equipped with technologies that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Lieutenant Monica Harris commanded what appeared to be a communication ship, but actually controlled electronic warfare systems, capable of disrupting alien military operations across multiple star systems simultaneously. The human fleet represented capabilities that had been developed in secret over thousands of years. The aliens remained completely unaware of humanity's true military potential, viewing human vessels as harmless civilian ships that posed no threat to anyone. Their intelligence services had cataloged human technology as primitive compared to galactic standards, based on observations of equipment that had been deliberately designed to appear less capable than it actually was. 3,000 years of careful deception had convinced every species in the galaxy that humans lacked the capability for serious military. Operations Director Murphy coordinated the final preparations from his agricultural facility on Earth, reviewing reports from intelligence operatives throughout the galaxy, while ensuring that humanity's true capabilities remained hidden until the moment of revelation. The underground military complex had been expanding continuously during the peaceful centuries, developing weapons and tactics that incorporated lessons learned from studying every known form of galactic warfare. The alien fleets were preparing for what both sides expected to be the decisive battle of the war, committing their most powerful vessels to engagements that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. However, neither side realized that their conflict was being monitored by observers who possessed the knowledge and capability to end the war whenever they chose to act. The question was no longer whether humanity would intervene, but how they would choose to demonstrate their true nature to a galaxy that had forgotten what humans were capable of accomplishing. War Commander Karthak and Admiral Zixara both issued orders to their fleets that authorized the use of weapons that had been banned for 3 millennia, terrible devices capable of destroying entire worlds or rendering star systems uninhabitable for millions of years. The escalation toward ultimate warfare was accelerating, as both sides became increasingly desperate to achieve victory before their enemies could deploy similar weapons. The galaxy stood on the edge of devastation that would dwarf anything seen during the previous Galactic War. Human intelligence networks reported that both alien fleets were moving toward a confrontation near the galactic capital world, where the presence of neutral observers and diplomatic facilities would normally prevent the use of world-destroying weapons. However, desperation was overcoming traditional restraints as commanders on both sides realized that conventional warfare could not produce the decisive victory their species required. The time had come for humanity to reveal what 3,000 years of preparation had accomplished. Admiral Price received authorization to proceed with operations that had been planned and rehearsed for centuries but never implemented. The human fleet would soon demonstrate capabilities that would shock every species in the galaxy and force a fundamental reconsideration of humanity's place in galactic civilization. The war was about to end, but not in any way that the alien combatants expected or understood. The final battle of the Galactic War was about to begin above the capital world of Galactic Prime, where representatives from hundreds of species had gathered to witness what many believed would be the end of galactic civilization as they knew it. Both the Zephyrian Empire and Altarian Federation had committed their most powerful fleets to this ultimate confrontation, bringing weapons that had been forbidden for 3,000 years, and tactics that promised devastation on a scale not seen since the last great galactic war. War Commander Karthak commanded over 5,000 vessels arranged in battle formations that stretched across millions of kilometers of space, their hulls gleaming with the deadly beauty of weapons designed to crack planets and boil away atmospheres. His alliance now included military forces from dozens of species, creating an armada that represented the largest concentration of destructive power in recorded galactic history. The Zephyrian commander stood on his flagship bridge with confidence that bordered on certainty, knowing that no force in the galaxy could stand against such overwhelming might. Admiral Zixara faced him with a fleet nearly as impressive, her ships employing stealth technologies and exotic weapons that could phase through normal matter to strike at the quantum foundations of reality itself. The Altarian coalition had sacrificed entire star systems to build weapons capable of matching Zephyrian firepower, creating devices that violated natural laws and threatened the stability of spacetime in the immediate battle zone. Both commanders prepared to unleash forces that would reshape the galaxy, regardless of who emerged victorious. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace appeared almost pathetic compared to the alien armadas, consisting of fewer than 200 vessels that looked more like civilian patrol boats than serious military hardware. Admiral Sandra Brooks commanded from the bridge of the UES Resolution, watching as alien sensors detected her small force and dismissed it as irrelevant to the coming battle. The human ships broadcast peaceful intentions and requested permission to observe the engagement for historical purposes. Both alien commanders granted the human request with contempt, barely concealed behind diplomatic courtesy. They viewed the human presence as an amusing reminder of how the galaxy's newest members still failed to understand the realities of serious warfare. Some alien officers actually welcomed human witnesses, believing that accounts of the coming battle would spread throughout the galaxy and discourage other species from opposing the victors. Captain Tyler Manning commanded the lead human vessel as it took position at what appeared to be a safe distance from the battle zone, officially present to record historical data, but actually preparing to demonstrate capabilities that would redefine galactic understanding of military power. His ship looked unremarkable compared to the massive alien dreadnoughts, but concealed within its modest hull were weapon systems that incorporated 3,000 years of continuous research and development. The battle began with both alien fleets unleashing their most devastating attacks simultaneously, creating explosions that briefly outshone the system's star and sent shockwaves rippling through spacetime itself. Weapons that could shatter moons struck shields designed to withstand the collapse of neutron stars, while reality-warping devices created localized distortions that made normal physics temporarily irrelevant in small pockets of the battlefield. However, the spectacular destruction produced remarkably little strategic effect, as both sides had developed defenses specifically designed to counter their enemies' most powerful weapons. Ships were destroyed and crews were killed, but the fundamental balance of power remained unchanged despite the enormous expenditure of energy and exotic matter. The aliens were fighting according to patterns that human observers had studied for millennia, using approaches that prioritized impressive displays over actual effectiveness. Admiral Brooks waited until both alien fleets had committed their most powerful weapons before giving the order that would change galactic history forever. The human ship suddenly revealed capabilities that no alien intelligence service had ever suspected, deploying weapons that existed nowhere in galactic databases and employing tactics that incorporated lessons learned from 3,000 years of studying every known form of warfare. Engineer Phil Watson worked at his station aboard what aliens thought was a simple support vessel, activating systems that had been disguised as cargo handling equipment, but were actually modular weapon platforms capable of reconfiguring themselves for any type of engagement. His ship transformed before alien eyes from a harmless freighter into a mobile weapons platform that could engage targets across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Commander Laura Green commanded what appeared to be a medical vessel, but was actually an electronic warfare platform, capable of disrupting alien communications and sensor systems across the entire battle zone. Her equipment created interference patterns that blinded alien targeting systems, while simultaneously analyzing their frequencies and developing countermeasures in real time. Within minutes of activation, both alien fleets found their coordination breaking down as their command and control systems failed. The human attack was unlike anything the galaxy had seen for 3 millennia, employing weapons that bypassed alien defenses rather than overwhelming them, and using tactics that exploited every weakness in traditional galactic military doctrine. Human ships moved in ways that seemed impossible according to known physics, appeared in locations where sensors insisted nothing existed, and struck with precision that suggested complete knowledge of alien ship designs and crew procedures. Captain Manning's vessel demonstrated that human cargo ships carried weapon systems that could reconfigure themselves mid-battle to counter any threat, while small human patrol boats deployed devices that neutralized the reality-warping weapons. Both alien fleets had considered their ultimate advantage. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical innovation that made their enemies' massive fleets suddenly seem primitive and predictable. The battle ended not with the destruction of either alien armada, but with the complete neutralization of both fleets through non-lethal means that left every alien vessel intact but helpless. Human weapons disabled enemy ships without killing their crews, using technologies that could selectively target specific systems while leaving life support and emergency equipment fully functional. Within hours, thousands of the galaxy's most powerful warships had been reduced to floating hulks whose crews could only watch in amazement as human vessels moved. Among them offering assistance, Admiral Brooks broadcast a message to both alien fleets that was simultaneously transmitted to every inhabited world in the galaxy, her words reaching billions of beings who had been preparing for devastation on an unprecedented scale. She announced that the Galactic War was officially over, and that human forces would ensure no further hostilities occurred between any species for the foreseeable future. Any attempt to resume military operations would be met with immediate intervention by human peacekeeping forces. The revelation of humanity's true capabilities sent shockwaves throughout galactic civilization that would take centuries to fully process. Species that had viewed humans as harmless newcomers suddenly realized they had been living alongside beings who possessed military technology that made their own efforts seem like primitive attempts at warfare. The humans had spent 3,000 years appearing weak and harmless while actually becoming the most powerful military force in galactic history. Ambassador Lisa Kane addressed the emergency session of the Galactic Council that convened immediately after the battle, explaining humanity's position to delegates who could barely comprehend what they had witnessed. She revealed that humans had understood from the beginning that eternal vigilance was the price of preventing war, and had spent every day of the peaceful era preparing for the moment when conflict would inevitably return to the galaxy. While other species had enjoyed peace and allowed their military capabilities to stagnate, humans had continued developing new technologies and tactics specifically designed to end future conflicts as quickly and decisively as possible. They had not prepared for conquest or domination, Kane explained, but for the ability to preserve peace through overwhelming deterrent capability that made warfare pointless for any rational species. The human approach to maintaining peace was fundamentally different from the galactic norm, based on the principle that the best way to prevent war was to be so thoroughly prepared for it that no potential enemy would consider military action a viable option. This philosophy had guided human development for 3 millennia, creating capabilities that could end any conflict before it could cause serious damage to galactic civilization. Director Murphy reviewed the final reports from the operation while standing in his agricultural facility on Earth, watching as automated systems continued tending crops that helped feed billions of beings throughout human space. The cornfields above his underground military complex looked exactly as they had for centuries, giving no hint of the technologies that had just reshaped the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Humanity had revealed just enough of its capabilities to end the immediate crisis, while keeping its true potential carefully concealed.